Good afternoon again. It's Jim Whitehead, All Power Group, and Phoenix Animal. Now, I said this morning with my animal presentation that I was going to mix in some of the fun and great things I did over my many years. And that's what I'm going to talk to you today about. Early computers. Some of this will be boring for some people. Some will say this, hey, I wanted to know this. Anyway, this is what we're talking about. Early computers, 1979 to 2000. Okay, starting right off, you can see the Atari 800. It was a home computer released in 1979 by Atari Inc. It was part of the Atari 8-bit, and you'll hear me talk about bits a little bit in the, into the program. It was a part of the 8-bit family computers, which also included the Atari 400. Now, at the time, I was like, oh, I don't want the 400. I want the 800. So that's what I had. So what I'm actually going into, there's a lot of, you could probably talk for 50 days, but what I'm presenting are different aspects of what I actually used back when they were new and I was a lot younger. I started computing in the 80s, and there wasn't much computer availability before that time, or I would have done it sooner. Yes, there was the Altair. I didn't use it, and others, but and I wasn't an Apple guy at the time. So I'm just going to tell you what the computers I did. So, okay, some of the key features of the Atari 800. It was a 652C at 1.79 megahertz. Now, today we're in gigahertz and way beyond that, and it's like, really? You actually did computing at that speed? We didn't know anything else because that was the best of the best at the time. Okay, this unit had a whopping memory of 8 kilobytes. Now, you hear most of what they talk about today, either gigabytes or terabytes, and then we can go beyond that. And the neatest thing, and I discuss this here and there, is the metric system is pretty cool. So you got kilobytes, and then you go into megabytes, and you go into terabytes, and it's kind of either 100s or 1000s in the sense of the progression. So it's relatively mathematically logical. I mean, I talk often about the English system that we're under, where you have, let's say, a mile is 5,280 feet. How'd you get that? What's another, how much, a ton? We can go on and on and on as the things that make no sense. A yard is 3 feet. A foot is 12 inches. Nothing adds up. But with the metric system, it's all in tens, hundreds, and thousands. So you really kind of, if you know your home, you know your front door and your back door. And I know sometimes you say, where the heck do you get some of these analogies? They're right there, ready to go. This was expandable, though, to 48 kilobytes using user installable RAM modules. So it still isn't a lot of memory. Now, the biggest issue that I would say back then were the graphics capabilities of these first older computers. The graphics was 384 pixels per TV line, 256 colors, 8 sprites, rast interrupts. The sound was a programmable sound chip with 4 channels. And we've progressed so much because these computers, you used a TV as a monitor most of the time. Initially, they were green screen, or I guess you might say amber. So in other words, you had on the green screen monitors, you had any color you want as long as it was green. And then if you had another better day, you might say, well, I'm going to use a monitor that's amber. So you wouldn't say, is that real color? It's very similar to one of my presentations when I was talking about the first TV we had in the 50s. You would put a plastic cover over the screen, and the screen was black and white. Which, of course, at the time you'd say, this is great, look at this. I'm in my home and I can see the world. And you'd say, but I'd like some color. So you would take this colored cover and put it over the screen. So now you had a red screen or blue screen. It wasn't where you'd say, yeah, it's pretty inventful. Okay, the input. We had a keyboard, we had a joystick, we had paddle controllers, and other peripherals. Now, I used to play a lot of games on this, although I was always trying to move, when I started computing, into where it would be multi-purpose, meaning that you could also have where you could do business related. And as I remember, some of this is memory, which again, this was so near and dear to me. I'm pretty sure I got this first spreadsheet that would 1, 2, 3. And, you could do some accounting. Now, the operating system was DOS, and that was optional. You could also do BASIC. Bill Gates, God bless him, he started out with his own, operating system, and, look where they ended up going, and I went along with them and learned and just loved everything I was doing here, even though in today's world it's kind of like, you really had fun doing this? The Atari 800 was popular and successful home computer known for its affordable price compared to other home computers of the time. The Atari 800 was relatively inexpensive. For its time, it's saying excellent graphics and sound. The Atari 800 had impressive graphics and sound capabilities for its time, making it a popular choice for gaming and multimedia applications. There was a large library of software. The Atari 800 had a vast the software included games, productivity tools, and educational programs. And it was easy to use. It was relatively good for beginners. And I was a beginner. So, the Atari 800 was discontinued in 1992, but it continues to be a popular collector's item and is still used by enthusiasts today. The initial price was $1,000, equivalent to, in today's dollars, or 2023, of $4,200. That's a lot. I'm wondering where the heck I get $1,000 back then. So, is pretty cool. Now, the next one, and of course, I was never happy with if something better and bigger and shinier came out. So I generally, in this case, I remember I traded in. Trade-ins, are a savior in some cases, for the Atari 1200. So we went with 800 to the 1200. And this is pretty slick, pretty modern. And again, typically you would use a TV or, again, a green monitor that, the writing would be green or amber. And you couldn't have it where you'd say, I can switch to both, that I remember. So the Atari 1200 was, exciting. Another home computer released by Atari in 1985. It was a more powerful version of the Atari 800, featuring a faster processor. And I know I make big deals, but at the time they were. More memory and improved graphics and sound capabilities. So the Atari 1200 was pretty cool. It had a Motorola 68000 at 7.07 megahertz. The memory, and again, here we go, we're getting up there, was 128 kilobytes of RAM, expandable to 512. Now, I don't know if I did much with expanding the memory back then. Now, today I would always do that, but, back then it was like, well, if it worked, it works. The graphics, 384 pixels per TV line. 256 colors again, 8 sprites, raster interrupts. The sound was, again, a programmable sound chip with 4 channels. The input was a keyboard, joystick, paddle controllers, and other peripherals. And again, the operating system was the Atari, what they call the TOS, the operating system. It was designed to compete with more powerful 16-bit home computers like the Commodore Amiga and the Atari ST. Didn't have them, didn't go in that direction. However, it faced stiff competition and ultimately failed to achieve widespread success. So that's why it didn't last very long. And the lifespan, the Atari 1200, although still fondly remembered by many, yes, enthusiasts, it offered powerful gaming and multimedia experience, and its unique design and features set it apart from other home computers of the time. Now, the one thing I want to say was the progression of these computers are, you're getting more functional, you're enjoying them more, but they have a long way to go. One of my projects will be related to online modems and speeds and what we had back then. And just a little aside that I'll go into more involved explanation. The very first time I hooked up to another computer via a modem was a service called The Source. Most people wouldn't have heard of it, and CompuServe. But it was, my first connection was at 300 baud. That's slow. It was all just text, and green text or amber text. But through the years, I've had what one would consider aha moments, and that was one of those when I connected to a computer up, it was near Washington, D.C., and I was in Florida. Yep, Florida. Okay, my next computer. Now we're trying to head into more of a business computers, because they were more software, and the first one that I had that goes into this range, I don't know, would say, Jim, how can you keep going through all these computers? Hey, sell the other one, get a new one. So the Epson QX10. Now you're probably saying Epson. The biggest thing you hear related to Epsons right now are their inkjet printers, and no one probably knew that Epson actually made this QX10 computer with two 8-inch floppy drives for storage. Now you'd be going, you're kidding. Well, before that, you couldn't really save anything. So this was like a good step forward. So this 16-bit personal computer was released in 1983 by Epson. It was one of the first commercially available 16-bit home computers and was notable for its compatibility with CP/M-86, a popular operating system for business computers. Now, here, again, just to fit in around some of these, the CP/M-86, very good operating system, but at the same time, IBM released an IBM DOS and Bill Gates MS-DOS. And be honest with you, this is one of those sad points of where CP/M could have become more of a standard operating system for these computers, but it just wasn't marketed very well. So it basically didn't go like IBM DOS, and then Microsoft DOS, and then later, of course, we went into Windows. And yes, I used Windows 1. And it was like, what do you do with it? It really didn't do very much. And I bought my first mouse. And it was clunky. And it was like there weren't very, very many programs that actually could use it. So it's like, whoa, man, what are you doing? So, this was cool at the time. It had an Hitachi 6800 at 8 megahertz. Memory was 128 kilobytes, expandable 512. Storage, built-in, I said something wrong before, 5.25-inch floppy disk drives. Graphics was 80 by 24 character display on a monochrome monitor. Sound, built-in speaker, and again, the operating system was CP/M-86. And I did this. I was always looking to improve or make things better. And I ended up getting MS-DOS that could also run on this computer. And it was where, Anyway, the Epson QX10 was designed to be a business computer, and it offered several features that made it attractive to businesses, including compatibility with CP/M, allowed the businesses to run existing CP/M software on the QX10 without having to rewrite it. That is one of the big holy grails in general about computer programs is if you have an operating system that is kind of one to itself, a lot of people would say, well, it isn't really worth for me to put the time and effort into writing software for it. But the neat thing with this is if it was a CP/M oriented or 86 oriented software package, you could run it on the QX10. And it had expandable memory to 512 of RAM, which was more than enough for most businesses. I used a program called Valdocs, Valdocs, and that was put out by Epson. And it was a word processor, and it wasn't bad, but it's always like you don't want to use what comes with it. You want to use it for other things that you can add on. I also used under, the MS-DOS opportunity, a software package called Multiplan, and also a wonderful word processor called WordStar. It provided a convenient way to store and access data on its floppy disk drives. Despite its business-oriented features, the Epson QX10 was also used by home users for gaming and other purposes. I used it mainly just for business. And it's one of those things where it isn't where you get something as a business software, you say, I got to find a computer to run it. You buy these computers and you say, I got to find something I can run on it. And sometimes that wasn't always as easy as you thought. Okay, I don't want to go through some of the additional, but the initial price, and I don't even get it, how I even had the money back then, was $2,495, and that's equivalent in 2023 to $7,300. So this is not a cheap computer. Now, what I did is, again, I sold this to someone, and I'm the type of person, I sold everything, and it had what somebody could use to be functional. And I know they'd say, well, why are you selling it? Well, because I want to go to the next step. And am I still this way? Yeah. Thank goodness you don't change a lot. But the next computer was the IBM AT. Advanced Technology was what AT meant. Now, before the IBM AT, they had the IBM, just the IBM system, the PC, the IBM PC. And that didn't really strike me as being really, really exciting. So I moved on with this, and this was a personal computer introduced by IBM in 1984. It was a significant upgrade to the original IBM PC, and it became a popular choice for businesses and home users alike. Add-on speed was 4.77 megahertz. Now, and again, I guess it's like, Jim, you're just looking to spend money. There was what you could add to the back, where it went in from the back of the PC into this, into the guts of the unit. I added a dial frequency counter that would allow me to push it up from 477 megahertz up to 8 megahertz. And I remember I'm still that way in the reference saying, I want to have it being faster and faster and faster. So yeah, I did this. Now what you would do is, whether it was a good day or bad day, you'd go as high as you could to 8 megahertz. And it would lock up. You'd say, well, I guess I went a little bit too close to 8 megahertz. So you'd have to reboot it. And what it had was the Intel 80286 at 6 megahertz. And memory again was 512, expandable beyond that. Now, there were a lot of business programs for this, and I bought my first, because again, if you look at the picture, you'll see that it had two 5 1/4 disk drives, floppy disk drives. And yeah, money, right? And what I did is I bought my first hard drive. Now, a hard drive is in back then was just a inside a container, or you could in some case take one of the floppies, but that didn't usually work. But what we did, I bought a 10 megabit hard drive. Now, you might think that's a lot. It's not. But back then, everything was in tiny little memory chunks, small programs. Now, one aside that, and not to get too technical, but and what I've explained so far is you would say typically a lot of these could go up to 512 kilobytes. Well, what happened and what the situation was, there was a maximum memory capability of what we call 640 megabytes. And, that's not a lot. But back then, when you're putting it on a floppy disk drive, or instead, you've got attached, a spinning memory platter, and you can store things. And you don't have to keep flipping, floppies in and out, yada, yada, yada. Now, the initial operating systems could only address 640 kilobytes. I mentioned that a second ago. Well, we wanted to go higher in memory because 640 was not still, and programs were small. So what we were able to buy and install into this, and excuse the pictures, and by the way, these pictures are not AI generated. I tried to do that. Hey, the Atari 800. No, not even close. It would put out a computer, but not the computer from anything that I ever saw or knew. So, you had to pull stuff from wherever. And believe it or not, some of these are still for sale on eBay. I didn't know that either. And again, that's why I love doing these, because you get into wow, that's pretty amazing. Now, what you're seeing is this was an Intel above board. It was a memory card. And I remember you had to populate it. You'd buy those, and it's hard to see them really, but they were relatively small with metal prongs. And you'd put 1 and then 2 and 3 and 4 and 5. And what that would do, it was either called first, this was like an Intel above board that could do what they call expanded memory. And you could use it, and you won't be tested, but as a RAM disk, or at least it gave you a little bit more overhead. You couldn't run larger programs generally, but it kind of allowed a little bit of flexibility. So the extended memory went to I think 3 megabytes with the extended or expanded memory. Now, the I'm sorry, I'm getting a little bit, you know, so we had again the floppy disk drives. Hard disk drive was optional. Now color. Here we go. Graphics. And again, this was going in the right direction, but still not there. We had what we call CGA, color graphics adapter. Now I remember, and that was graphics were not very good, but then we were able to buy an EGA, which was enhanced graphics adapter. The sound was built-in speaker. Operating system was MS-DOS 3.0 or later. So the IBM AT was a powerful computer for its time, and it offered several features that made it attractive to users. It was a faster processor, significantly faster than the 8088, and this was the 80286. Using the original IBM PC, you could do the more memory with the above boards, and some of them would do, within being able to run larger programs. The hard disk drive, the PCAT, could be equipped with a hard disk drive, which provided more storage space than floppy disk drives. It had a new PCA-AT bus architecture, which allowed to be easily expanded with additional hardware. In other words, you had, within the AT, you had additional slots inside the PC so that you could expand it. And did I do that? Absolutely. And you and I know I'm telling things that probably don't make a lot of sense, but the IBM PC, whenever you would put memory cards in, you'd have to deal with ensuring that you didn't have what we call an interrupt conflict. So you might have to say, well, I put this card in and the machine won't boot. Okay, well, I take the card out, move it into another slot, and maybe it would boot. And that was all related that back then, computers would use interrupts. And that means they're separating one thing from another. So if you put two boards inside the AT and they were going to use the same interrupt, it wouldn't run. So you'd say, well, okay, I have to take that board out and move it over a slot in the motherboard and basically go from there. Now you're looking at the basically a personal computer line made by Gateway, and that is what I basically went to. And by the way, just to make where I fill in one piece I didn't say with the IBM AT, it was initially $37.90, and again, I don't even know where I got this money. I don't know, but that is equivalent to $2,023 of $10,500. Are you kidding me? So anyway, moving on, I mentioned, and I'm coming back to it. It allowed, the 640 KB memory by the computer, going beyond limitations of the original MS-DOS operating system. So going and moving on, we, this was the Gateway computer. And, progressing, moving forward here. The Gateway was pretty cool because it would use, as a moving forward, the Pentium computer. And I know I would get a gateway that had, let's say, 100 megahertz, and then they came out with the 120. Yeah, I would have to. And generally speaking, it wasn't where you could actually just take the old chip out and put a new chip in. No, it wouldn't work that way. But that's the way, it went. And in today's world, it's just amazing how much we thought this was an improvement in what we could end up doing. So we got into so many different additional addressing memory, and it was pretty cool. Now, okay, the gateway computers, and that's what I switched over to from the IBM AT. It was a popular American computer company. And a lot of these, some of you remember some of this, so you have a flashback, some will say, I don't know what you're talking about. But it's always nice to know the history of where we're going. Anyway, Gateway Computer was known for its distinctive, and this is true, a cow-spotted boxes and innovative marketing strategies. Here's a bit more about the company's history and what made it stand out. Now, yes, boy, does that bring back memories. I used to go to the Gateway 2000 store all the time, and they'd say, well, you're going to get a bigger computer. It's like, I just would have to look. So they started using the Intel Pentium computer chips. And a little more about the company. Founding an early success in 1985, founded by Ted Waite and Mike Hammond in 1985, Gateway originated in a farmhouse in Iowa. Its rural beginnings inspired the company's signature black and white cow-spotted boxes, which became a memorable part of its brand identity. The company started Gateway 2000 focusing on selling affordable build-to-order computers directly to consumers. The direct sales model allowed customers to customize their systems, which set apart from competitors that sold pre-built machines in stores. So again, you could go in, and that's probably why I kept going in. So the growth in the 1990s, Gateway was a major player in the personal computer market. And it's kind of sad in a way in general. The different models, and in the sense they had what I guess you might call this store that you're seeing a picture of, and you would go in and you could order, as I said, and I'm not good at waiting for things, or it wasn't back then. So you would go in and you could say, okay, I'm looking at this one that has this amount of memory, and this one has this amount of memory, and this processor. And you could order right there the bigger and better system if you wanted to. But again, it was sold. These were sold at competitive prices, but you would again have to wait for it to come. And I guess when you're younger, you never want to wait for anything. So the company went public in 1993, expanding internationally and becoming one of the top computer manufacturers in the world. Now, somebody's going to say, well, what about Dell? Well, that's another whole track. How about Texas Instruments? That's another whole track. As I said earlier in this presentation, I didn't go into where I am demonstrating things that I didn't use or have. So that's why I could do homework and talk about Dell, which is still being sold today. But I don't think I ever bought a Dell computer. And nothing against Dell, just however you go. It offered everything in the sense of Gateway PC to monitors and accessories, eventually venturing into laptops and other electronics. Now, in today's world, laptops aren't bad. They're still slower than its counterpart desktops, typically, because it's got to be where you can run it on battery and you can take it out, and so it always would have a processor that, even though it could be made by Intel, it would be one that was made for a laptop, which would be generally slower. And I didn't want anything slow. So the cow spotted branding in Gateway's packaging featured cow spots. It was a clever nod to rural roots and became one of the most iconic branding choices in the tech world. Their ads, filled with human references to their farm-based origins, gave the company a unique appeal compared to more corporate competitors like Dell and Compaq. Now, if you remember Compaq, I didn't have a Compaq either, but their first system was kind of portable type. So challenges in the 2000s, Gateway struggled to compete as larger companies like Dell and HP, Hewlett-Packard, took over the market, and more aggressive pricing and supply chain efficiency. So they built a better company. So anyway, in the 2000s, they opened the retail stores, which you can see there, and it tried to gain more market share, but this move was not successful, and the stores eventually closed. And in 2007, Acer acquired Gateway, and after a series of financial challenges and restructuring efforts, Gateway was acquired by a Taiwanese computer manufacturer in 2007. Under Acer, Gateway continued to operate as a brand, but it's lost much of its previous market presence and visibility. So anyway, that's Gateway, and moving to pretty much the end here. This is, and my plan for this presentation was going to be a lot more, how would you say, detailed as to more things. But I realized as I started doing my homework that, there were so many different things I did back then that you would be saying here, Jim, I'm not going to spend an all-nighter listening to this presentation. So anyway, that's about it. I think the last thing I will say is, the Intel, again, the Pentium processors are the grandchild of what we have today. And it's just, please, ask some questions. And I appreciate you allowing me to progress besides my animal presentation this morning and being able to do some tech for this afternoon. So anyway, that's about it for now. I want to thank you very much for listening today, and take care. Thank you very much. And, I know you'll, by whether you like this or not, will let me know, and we'll see if this was a good idea or not. But thank you. Blessings to everybody. Thank you.